Before you begin cross-stitch, ask yourself, do I know how to count to 10? And am I prepared for the answer to be no? Because it will be. Gridding refers to the process of marking your fabric with a grid so that you can more easily follow the cross-stitch pattern and catch mistakes more quickly if you do place stitches in the wrong spot. The simplest option for gridding is to buy pre-gridded fabric, such as Zweigardt's Easy Count fabric, which features a wash-removable grid. This option is by far the easiest method. You don't have to do anything to prepare the fabric, as the grid is already printed on. And the fabric seems to be available in a variety of counts, from 14 all the way up to 32 count. Unfortunately, it's only widely available in white fabric. And though I haven't personally used it, I have seen folks online struggling to get their lines to wash out completely after they've finished their project. Lastly, since the lines need to be washed out, you'll need to make sure that you are using a color-fast floss like DMC. Another popular option for gridding is to use pens or markers that you can erase after the project is finished. Water-soluble markers or friction heat-erasable pens are often used for this method. If you aren't buying pre-gridded fabric, this is the next quickest gridding option. And in contrast with the final gridding method, you won't have anything extra in the way while you stitch. Theoretically, these markers are a really easy option, but it's not always perfect. The Friction brand was made for paper, not cloth, so it doesn't always disappear entirely. I've had the markers leave a faint yellow line on white Aida, and the pens leave white lines on dark Aida. Additionally, if you live in a cold climate, the lines may reappear if the piece gets cold enough. I haven't personally used water-soluble markers, but I have seen others have issues with the lines not fully washing out. Similar to pre-gridded fabric, you need to use a color-fast floss brand like DMC, and additionally, you won't be able to use these markers on hand-dyed fabrics. With all those caveats, I only recommend this method for full coverage projects where the grid will be completely covered in case your markers leave any faint lines behind. If you want to try it on a project where the lines might be visible, be sure to test your marker in a corner of the fabric before you commit. To grid with markers, you should first find the center of your fabric by folding the cloth in half, horizontally and vertically. Use your marker to carefully denote the center lines. From that center point, mark every 10 stitches to form the foundation of your grid. Remember, you only need to go as far as your pattern will go, not the entire fabric. You can use a ruler if you'd like to speed up the process, or just follow the lines of the fabric. Double and triple check your counts before drawing in your full lines. If you have multiple pens, it may be helpful to use a different color for the center lines. Finally, use your marker to complete the remaining grid lines. If using a ruler, be sure to line up things very carefully so you know exactly which holes your lines refer to. The last gridding option is to create your grid with thread or a monofilament fishing line. The greatest benefit of this method is that it is 100% reversible. You can always remove your stitches. The biggest downside of this method is how much time it takes. If you use embroidery floss, bits of thread can also get caught in the other stitches, which may make it difficult to remove your grid lines when you've finished. And if you're using fishing line, it can get a bit in the way of your other stitching or leave larger holes once you've pushed it through, since it's a bit thicker than standard embroidery floss. Personally, I've had bad luck with markers, so I do prefer to grid with thread on big projects, especially if they're only partial coverage. To grid with thread, you should first find the center of your fabric by folding the cloth in half horizontally and vertically. Using a contrasting thread, mark the center with a small plus sign. From the center point, mark every 10 stitches to form the foundation of your grid. Remember, you only need to go as far as your pattern will go, not the whole fabric. Double and triple check your counting, then stitch in the rest of the lines. If you have multiple colors, you may want to use a different color for the center line. There are 2 approaches to gridding with thread. You can either leave the pluses on top or the lines on top. Lines on top makes it a little bit easier to avoid stitching through if you are using thread, but it's a little bit less pretty. Up to you. So, what's the final verdict on gridding? The main reason to grid a project is to ease counting in large cross-stitch projects. There are pros and cons to each option, so consider the time it will take, the supplies you have, and the needs of your specific project to decide if you will grid and which method to use. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel to get more cross-stitch tips in the future.